All right. So I want to talk today about how things have changed so much between baby boomers and their children, the millennials. Retirement for millennials is going to look very different than what most boomers are looking at. The world is changing. Millennials are not growing up in the same world as their boomer parents. Boomers, many of them are going to retire on pensions. Pensions do not exist for most millennials any longer. It's pretty rare unless you're government, teacher, things like that. And realistically, CPP, well, we just don't know where that's headed. So I don't think today's millennial can or ever should rely on a pension. So how can they create their own pension, or how can you as a parent help your millennial child have the best future, the best retirement, prepare themselves for the style of retirement, the age of retirement that they want? That's something that I want to talk about today. So I'm not quite the millennial generation. I'm a little older than that. But I know a lot of my own parents' generation and the boomer generation in general. A lot of them will pay down their own primary residence, and what they'll do is one day when they pass away, that will be distributed amongst their dependents, however that looks like, 1 kid, 2 kid, 5 kids, 10 kids, which is great. To be honest, to just have a windfall one day of cash is nice and convenient for anyone who may receive it. It's very tragic that it has to happen upon the death of a parent, but realistically, that's far less ideal than what you can do by helping your child out now. So what I do want to do is show you how giving, for example, $70,000 to your child today to invest in equity in real estate versus giving them, say, when your house goes, when you pass away, even $500,000. How actually $70,000 today versus $500,000 25 years from now is grossly different in the actual monetary value, but what it can provide for your child. So this is something I'm particularly passionate about because I have a 4-year-old who will never be able to own a home and likely never be able to take advantage of this unless she is very financially well off, because we're just seeing where the housing prices are going. But right now it's something that millennials can take advantage of with the help of parents. So I do have an example here that I wanted to go through. My market area is Durham, so we're going to use a Durham example. If you wanted to buy today a legal 2 units, so essentially a duplex type of a property, it has 2 legal units. We'll say upper has 3 bedrooms, lower has 2 bedrooms. You're likely paying, depending on how well done it is, we'll say around $575 just for this example right here. If you wanted to buy that with your millennial child and it's going to be their primary residence, they can put less than 20% down, meaning in this example, we're putting 10% down. So that 10% down with other closing costs, it's roughly $70,000. So that's what I'm talking about, giving your child $70,000 to do this today. I will also mention you likely will need to help them qualify for the mortgage at this point. But having your name on title with theirs, if you've raised these children like we all hope we've raised our children, shouldn't be an issue. You'd be happy to help your child get into their first home. So by doing this, we're looking at your mortgage, your property tax and insurance will come to about $3,000 per month. You could rent out your upper unit for $1,750 per month. And then you have a remaining outstanding cost of about $1,250. So that $3,000 of expenses less your rent. This is sort of what's remaining. That's what your child is going to pay as rent to live there. They're essentially paying that to themselves, right? They're on title. This is their own property. How much rent does your child pay in the community right now, for example? $1,250 is a pretty inexpensive rent for a 2-bedroom unit just about anywhere that I know of in the GTA. So they're probably paying less rent than they would normally, but all that rent goes towards their property. How does that really look in the long run? So if you've got a millennial child, chances are perhaps in 25 years is where you would maybe pass away and then leave the proceeds of your home to all your children. So that's what we're using in this example. In this example, over 25 years, we're looking here at how much the principal in that property is paid down, how much the property will appreciate over 25 years, and how much equity is within that property. This is looking at just a 2% appreciation, which is so insanely conservative. We've averaged just more in the realm of 6% over the last 25 years. So this is grossly low, to be honest with you, and super conservative. But the reality is, at the end of the day, the home is now paid off. You've had a 25-year mortgage, so it's now paid off. And there's almost $1 million right here. So you've given your child 70. They have a property paid down. That's worth nearly $1 million. Again, these are the most conservative numbers we could look at. Not only that, but that child paid $1,250 a month, 25 years, plus their $69,000 down. They only ever put $375,000 into that property, you and or them. So you'd say you put in 70, they only put $305,000 in. The rest of that was rent collected and appreciation. That was $500,000. If you price that out for how much money they made per year, they made $20,000 a year in their appreciation and the rent that they got. What would your child have to do in a job to make another $20,000 a year, right? And if we really looked at these numbers, something a little more realistic, at 3% appreciation or 4% appreciation, which are much more realistic numbers given history, over 25 years, they'd actually have 1.7 million in equity, or at 4%, they'd have over $2 million in equity. That property would be paid off over 25 years. That would actually equate to them making another $66,000 a year, averaged out over that time. That's giving them this now to start investing in a property has the potential to make them that amount every year for 25 years. But when you pass away, you're going to give them $500,000. Not let them have this $2 million at the end of those 25 years. It's not as simple or as black and white as that, but the premise of it is correct. They have an asset that will continue to appreciate, that will continue to grow in value, that will create more money and financial freedom for them in the long run. $70,000 now, or $250,000 to $500,000 25 years from now, are grossly different, because that $70,000 now is $2 million later on, not $500,000. So I really want to stress how advantageous this is. The reason this is so important, they will not have a pension to retire on. They need to have alternate plans for the future. So while they got into this property, maybe at year 15, year 10, they don't want to live there anymore. But look how much equity they've actually built up over that time. They can keep that investment property and now actually go buy a single family home for themselves. And let's just keep that investment property still doing its same thing, still paying down, right? Now somebody else is paying that $1,250, not your child. So they haven't even put this much money in at the end of the day. But they still have the $2 million when we're all said and done. And it's allowed them to have that lifestyle where they can actually own a home and that investment property that is $2 million in retirement, that they sell, that they leverage. Maybe they take a second mortgage out or a line of credit on that property to do other investing. Likely what happens with most investors is they want to invest in more properties, which is fine. You want that ambitious child to look at that. But the reality is that $60,000 to $70,000 now is $1 to $2 million in 25 years. That doesn't involve you giving them any money off of your home when you do pass away one day later on down the road. That is actually the value that they'll have at the end of the day. And that's why it is so important. We really want to prepare our children for the generation they're growing up in, not the generation that we grew up in. Things are different. That line between people who own and people who rent is widening every day, because while housing prices go up at a certain rate, our average salaries for adults are not raising at the same rate. So that gap between income and housing prices is widening and widening and widening every year. And that's why it's more and more important that this is one of the avenues we can consider to help our children invest in the future and essentially create their own pension that they will not have through the government or their employer later on, with a few very rare exceptions. So this is something I'm incredibly passionate about. It's something that I started investing in real estate due to my daughter. I wanted to create a very great financial future for her. And I also wanted to find a way where the money I made working very hard also worked for me. So this is a strategy that I implement myself very, very actively, in so much as my daughter is only 4 and I've already bought a property with her in mind. That is her inheritance. So something that I'd love to get some people out to talk to a little bit more, something that I'd like millennials to really consider, because while they're hung up on now and what's going on in social media and having this great life and this great experience, that's wonderful. You can do that and still invest in a property and have this great future later on and have all this equity, all of this money later on in life, and you're not paying more rent than you would normally be paying anyways. You have more responsibility. You have to make sure that house is looked after. You do have things you have to take care of. Because that equity isn't worth anything if the house burns down or anything like that. But at the end of the day, it's not costing them anymore. It doesn't really need to change their lifestyle in a negative way. This can be a purely positive situation. And we know half of them are are renting multiple people to units in places like that. Well, why rent to somebody else? Why be one of 3 roommates renting this main floor apartment when you can be the person owning that apartment and bringing in roommates, bringing in other renters, and ultimately positioning yourself ahead of most of your colleagues much further in the future. And even in as short, look at this equity, even as short as 5 years, right? We're really growing quite quickly. So if you're interested in hearing more about this, whether you're a millennial parent, whether you're not a millennial, please do come and join me at my next seminar, where I'll be talking to millennials and their parents and anyone interested about how they can utilize this strategy, how it really works in the real world, and I'll be able to answer any questions that you have to see if it's a good fit for you as well.